just so wrong.
We must act now.
The Clark County Education Association putting out a strong message tonight ahead of a meeting on school safety. Teachers from across the country came out in force to call on state lawmakers to make schools safer.
This follows a recent situation where at least a half a dozen guns were found on school campuses in a matter of days. Fox News' Mike Allen reports on a change and a proposal how schools discipline violent students.
I was assaulted by a student in my class.
I most recently was told by a 5-year-old that they wanted to stab me and watch me bleed out.
She would start flipping desks and throwing things at students.
This student grabbed me, threw me up against a wall.
She completely trashed my room and hit another student in the face with a hardcover book.
He would throw backpacks, books, pencils, chairs, and shove desks.
He pulled my arm with so much force that I thought he dislocated my shoulder.
That student went to my desk, grabbed a sharp pair of scissors, and threw them at my face.
When I asked why he behaved this way, he responded that he wanted to hurt me because he was angry.
Incidents like this are one of the prime reasons why many educators are leaving the profession.
Clark County teachers making impassioned pleas on Thursday for state lawmakers to pass AB 285, which makes punishments for students who repeatedly disrupt class with violent behavior harsher.
It's not fair that a student can walk into a classroom and be violent and disruptive without any consequences.
The bill would essentially do away with what's called restorative justice in Nevada schools, which the state defines as intervention and support provided by the school to improve a student's behavior. The teachers who testified on Thursday say that when put into practice, restorative justice failed them by being too lenient on violent kids.
That student in my classroom had learned that violence is acceptable because of the lack of discipline and consequences for bad behavior.
It's just a fancy buzzword and a complete failure. My story is an accurate depiction of what restorative justice looks like in our schools. It's not working and there's no accountability.
AB 285 does away with individualized plans for students causing problems in favor of what's called progressive discipline, which takes a more direct approach to behavior change for kids. For example, by making it easier to expel violent students and put them in a behavioral school. The teachers who testified today say it's not just their lives that are being impacted by those violent students.
When children feel unsafe in school, they can't focus, their attendance and their grades begin to drop.
The executive director of the Children's Advocacy Alliance testified against the bill, citing concerns over what happens to the children who get expelled.
We're also concerned that children will end up in the juvenile justice system unnecessarily when there could have been some kind of intervention at the elementary school level.
Holly Wellborn says there are certain things that need to happen before a more aggressive approach to discipline can exist in Nevada schools.
Until this body is willing to make that investment in those community-based supports, we are failing kids for the future, and we're failing our community for the future.
In studio, Mike Allen, Fox 5 News, local Las Vegas.
And after today's hearing, authors are working with all the parties to amend the bill in the committee and address those concerns.